Daniel, how important was that game on Monday night in what's going to play out this draft and maybe in the next couple of years in the NFL? Am I overstating the importance of it?
No, you're not overstating it, Dan. But if you'll indulge me for just a second here, because these Thanksgiving names, I just have to get a couple off my chest before we even get started.
Okay.
As somebody who grew up in San Diego, I'll never forget that '84 home run hit by Steve Gravy to beat the Cubs.
Right.
That was big.
Right,
and then out of the bullpen, you can always bring in Craig. There's no food Lefferts.
Okay.
And then my favorite basketball player was Jason Kidd's Table.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
That's my three.
All right. All right. I'll give you 2 for 3.
Very good.
Come on.
Oh, yeah.
I love those. Those were very good, especially the Lefferts one was good.
Yeah, but that's not the litmus test. Is it's better than Fritzy's? Like it should be better.
Very short hurdle to climb.
Yes. Yes. You step over the hurdle. Okay. So.
All right. Football.
As we move forward, Monday night's game means what to the future of the NFL?
Well, I think it's the exclamation point on what took place in the Super Bowl last year. I thought being in that stadium to watch the Eagles give up 600 yards and still win a Super Bowl, that was definitely something that was going to be felt in a big way in the personnel room. And I think that game, what everybody was watching last night, was kind of the exclamation point. And I tweeted out after the game, this is a bad day to be a run-stuffing defensive tackle that's entering into the draft, because you watched that game last night, and I think we would all agree you've got top 5 quarterbacks, but you also had top 5 running backs, arguably the best running back in the NFL in Todd Gurley. And you look at the way that game went, they decided to give Todd Gurley 12 carries. They gave Kareem Hunt 14 carries. Mahomes threw it 46 times, and Goff threw it 49 times. So if you're drafting defensive linemen, do you want them to have an impact on the 49 pass plays or on the 12 run plays? So, like I was in Baltimore when we drafted Haloti Ngata, one of my favorite players I've ever scouted, was a great player for our team there. And right now in the current climate, I don't think he would be a first-round pick, because if you can't get to the quarterback, your value is so greatly diminished, and that goes to a bunch of different positions as well. You need playmakers on offense. You need on defense, again, defensive linemen, you got to have 2 pass rushers. And then outside of those pass rushers, you need some guys that can just make plays. You're going to give up a 20-yard run here or there. Who cares? Who can generate a turnover? So that's kind of where everything's headed.
But I also wonder, I feel like you can scheme on offense, but you have to have players on defense. You
have to have speed. You have to have speed on defense. I mean, if you look at the bad defensive teams, Dan, they are slow. Ebukam ran 4.5 flat coming out of Eastern Washington. He made 2 huge plays in that game. Aaron Donald ran 4.65. Obviously, we know how great he is. But you have to be dynamic and fast on defense, and you sacrifice a little bit of size, no question. Offensively, I do think coaching-wise, scheme is huge. It's like that goes back to the old Bill Walsh way of building a team, which is I'll spend all my first-round picks on defensive players. Because you got to have the athletes on that side of the ball where I can work around my scheme a little bit on offense.
Yeah, I truly believe that. But if I said that you could have to start your team Aaron Donald or Todd Gurley,
I would take Aaron Donald. Again, I love Todd Gurley, but I just think in a passing league, and finding interior pass rushers is probably the toughest thing to find. Outside, tackles right now is darn near impossible. Because of the way the college game has been played. We're just not seeing a lot of good offensive tackles enter the league. But interior pass rushers is right there. So I would go with an interior pass rusher. I mean, you watch that game. I mean, Todd Gurley's better than Kareem Hunt, no question. But Kareem Hunt's a really good player. They got him in the 3rd round. So I'll pay the premium, and I'll take the interior pass rusher.
If you have the NFL and they sort of piggyback or adopt a lot of things they see in the college ranks, the best teams in college football, well, certainly Alabama, you don't have NFL teams trying to emulate what we see with Alabama. It used to be that was the style you had. You had a great running attack. Your passer threw, 15 to 20 times, and then you had a great defense. Will we see defense win championships again?
I think it's going to be really hard when you look at the rules the way they are. It's just so heavily slanted towards the offense. So, I think you'll see teams with great defensive players. It's just going to be hard to keep anybody in check the way everything's set up right now. It's just all steered towards the offense. I mean, I think you can even just look at the pass interference penalty. The difference in that from the college game to the NFL game is so huge.
Do you think that was what's the one rule change, though, that has brought us to this scoring output?
Well, I think the two big ones, and obviously one of them's not recent, but just with the way they crack down on illegal contact and holding on the DBs beyond 5 yards, where you can't touch anybody, that's made it darn near impossible for them. That's huge. And then I think, for the safety of the game, but taking away the headshots over the middle of the field, there's nothing to discourage you from working in the middle of the field. So you used not to be able to take small bodies and work the middle of the field because you just wouldn't survive. And now you can take your speedsters and you can run by people, and then you can also run them in the middle of the field because there's no threat they're going to get hit or hurt.
He's Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network analyst, former NFL scout, joining us, Dan Patrick Show. But I look at Patrick Mahomes. You have these mock drafts, and I love them, but I hate them because I don't think they mean anything right now. And then all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes jumps up. Deshaun Watson jumps up. Whereas if you looked at the mock drafts, I mean, Christian Hackenberg would have been the number one pick after his freshman year if he could have come out at Penn State. So at what point do you start to assess these mock drafts and say, okay, now you're seeing something that is real as opposed to somebody who's just analyzing this from afar?
Well, I have to do I think 5 of them a year, and the first one is always right after the junior declare date, so it's like January 14th. So I do 5 of them. The 5th of which is I do the night before the draft. So don't tell anybody, but I probably wouldn't read anything to any of them until the one the night before the draft.
Is this a good quarterback draft?
Really good information. We'll see who all comes out. I don't think it's going to stack up with what we've had the last couple of years. So, look, I've got a lot more work to do on these guys, but usually by this time I've seen enough of some guys where I'm like, man, okay, I'm fired up. I can't necessarily say that at this point in time. But I haven't done my deep dive yet, Dan. But
we're also, on display on Monday night, you had Aaron Donald, who was just unbelievable. He was projected to be a 3rd or 4th round pick until he went to the combine. Patrick Mahomes, people thought, hey, fun guy, he got Favre-like qualities a little bit, a little gambler there, risk taker, but takes too many risks, and he played in the Big 12. We don't know how good he's going to. How did people miss? How did teams miss on Aaron Donald and Patrick Mahomes?
Well, look, Aaron Donald, I think, was just a question of, okay, his size was a concern. And, even though he was at Pitt, it wasn't like he was at, Alabama. So some concern there. I think I had him early on in the process in the late 20s, and then he ended up climbing way up from there. But now he's kind of the trendsetter for being, that body type and being as dominant as he was. And then you couldn't deny when he's tested, and you just saw how ridiculously explosive he was. It was like, okay, you can't penalize this guy anymore for his size. With Mahomes had tremendous ability, but he was so raw, Dan. He's been phenomenal, and I think there's obviously with his talent, he could have gone in different places and done well. But I think with his talent coupled, with Andy Reid and what they have in place there, I think that was you couldn't have gone to a better place. I've seen Andy Reid, having worked with him before, Dan. I've seen him take, those cars, like you drive around and you see somebody that's just taken like a Mercedes symbol and they've slapped it on a little cheapo car.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not a Mercedes. I think they just did it. Well, this was not that situation. I've seen Andy do that with other quarterbacks like Kevin Cobb. This was a sports car that just needed to be, washed and cleaned up, and it's sparkling right now.
I wonder if, and I tell people, when you look at these quarterbacks, it can be very tenuous. That do you have the same offensive coordinator? Do you have an offensive-minded head coach? What kind of weapons do you have? How good is your offensive line? So I could look at Josh Allen, and I don't know if I put Patrick Mahomes in Buffalo, what is he doing in Buffalo? Or if I put him in Cleveland, what's he doing in Cleveland? Or if I said Baker Mayfield is going to be in Kansas City. Like, you have to have those elements. I got Andy Reid, a brilliant offensive mind. I got a good offensive line, and I got unbelievable weapons as well. And you had a year to sit behind Alex Smith. So I think it's a great formula when you're looking for success. And Mahomes has been great, but I think that he had the pieces in place there to give him a head start.
I agree with you completely, and the situation absolutely matters. And again, I look at all the quarterbacks Andy Reid has got to play well. I mean, I can't tell you a quarterback he's had that hasn't played well. And then you take somebody with just super, incredible raw ability. That's why you're getting the crazy numbers that we're seeing right now. But trust me, when you're a scout, there are certain positions when you're in the room and you have maybe a lower grade on somebody. Like for me, it was the Colts. So if I had given the Colts, if I'd given an offensive lineman a free agent grade, and all of a sudden the Colts took him in the 4th round with Peyton Manning, and I just go, crap. I'm going to have to hear about this from my GM. Like, this guy started for the Colts for 6 years. And I'm like, Peyton Manning could take 5 guys 3 blocks from here and make them look good as an offensive line. He makes all the calls. He gets the ball out of his hands in 1 second. If we drafted that guy, it would have been a disaster. But that's kind of like with Andy Reid. When you give him a quarterback, they're going to work.
Who's the one player that you just wish you could have gotten that you didn't draft?
Oh, for me, it's Bob Sanders. You remember Bob Sanders with the Colts. We think about how good those Baltimore defenses were, and we were on the phone. Ozzie was on the phone trying to trade up to get Bob Sanders. We already had Ed Reed, and we were going to pair him with Bob Sanders, and so we were on the phone with the Colts to trade up, and they said, okay, if our guy's not there, we'll trade with you. And so we just kept talking to him and talking to him and talking to him. Finally, they're on the clock. And Ozzie says, all right, we got a deal. He goes, nope, our guy's still there. And he goes, who's your guy? And he goes, Bob Sanders. He goes, well, that was our guy, too.
If I said you could only have Ed Reed or Ray Lewis to start your defense.
Oh, man. Oh, I would say this. I will put it this way. This is as political as I can get. Ed Reed is the favorite player I've ever been around, and I would take Ray Lewis.
Okay. All right.
So does that get me out of trouble?
Yeah. Well, you only have to worry about Ed.
I mean, Ray, yeah. Well, I mean, but Ray, just from a leadership standpoint and what he got out of everybody else, Dan, we would be in the draft room and we were talking about a player, and we'd say, okay, he's unbelievably talented, but he doesn't play that hard. And we'd say, it doesn't matter. Ray will make him play hard. We can draft those guys because Ray won't allow it.
Yeah.
So that was a huge benefit to have him there.
Hey, thanks for joining us as always. Happy Thanksgiving, and thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
That's Daniel Jeremiah.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.